In this video, we're asking, why is one of London's most popular food markets closing next year? What's happening to the site instead? Is this the most beautiful development proposed for London this decade? And why is it so controversial? So the site we're looking at today is just to the north of Elephant and Castle. It's this bit of land which is known locally as Borough Triangle. Borough Tube is right nearby, it's not far from Borough Market, but most people will know it as the location of the Mercato Metropolitano food market. It's been here since 2016 on the site of an old paper mill, but it was always intended as a meanwhile use, which is like a temporary use for a site while it waits to be redeveloped. As well as Mercato's, there's an old petrol station and some heritage buildings as well. And we'll talk about what's happening with those heritage buildings further into the video. So here's what they're proposing to build on the site instead. It's a set of new tall buildings, the tallest of which will be 44 and 38 stories. There'll be 892 new homes, some new office space, and loads of retail and restaurant space, creating active frontages along those ground floors. And there'll also be a new permanent home for Mercato's, which we'll talk about in a sec. There's going to be 98 new trees and 3,620 square meters of public realm with a new central square, and a 5,000 square foot community hall which will be open to local residents. There's that big triangular sort of flat iron building which will help to define and amplify the corner of I think that's Borough High Street and Borough Road, and then these two 44 and 38 story skyscrapers just behind, which will kind of provide a bit of an entrance, a bit of a gateway into Elephant and Castle, which is another rapidly evolving and regenerating part of the city. And I think this view just shows off why I think this might be one of the best looking new developments currently proposed for London. Here we're looking on the ground floor along a Newington Causeway. So we're going into Elephant and Castle here. There's lovely green tiles along the ground floor there. Lots of active frontage, lots of retail space. I'll do a little before and after from street view here so you can see what that view looks like now, and of course what it is proposed to look like when this scheme is finished. I love those green tiles along the ground floor of those retail units there. That really breaks up the massing of the buildings really nicely. You can see how the buildings have pulled from Art Deco, especially that building on the left there. Looks very much like some of the Art Deco buildings that you see in New York and Chicago. And the architects have said that they've pulled a lot of inspiration from the Art Deco style in the design of these skyscrapers. It's really good to see. So this is the ground floor plan that they've done. So that there in the middle, that is the proposed new permanent home for Mercato Metropolitano. That's where they're going to be. You've got this huge public square in the center that all of these different streets will feed into. So it'll feel very much like a new hub for the area. You'll be able to access it from all of these different streets. It'll really feel like a new center point for the surrounding neighborhood. Mercatos will of course be encouraged to sort of spill their chairs and tables into this new public square. I'll show you some more renders of that public square in a second. It's going to look really stunning. And as well as that, there's loads of other retail units, loads of other restaurant units going all around it. And then the railway arches that currently run straight through the site, they are also going to be converted into shops and bars and different businesses to really activate that frontage onto the square there. There's a sort of a long-term master plan for all of the railway arches that cut through South London. So they're planning on regenerating all of these old railway arches from Borough Market all the way down to Elephant and Castle and beyond, with all of these like reutilised and reinvigorated railway arches with loads of restaurants and bars and businesses and things like that. And this development proposes also to reinvigorate those railway arches as well. So you're going to see a continuation of that low-line plan all the way through this site as well. And there's going to be new commercial spaces for businesses. There's going to be a woodland garden in the middle of the development, and loads of new streets and spaces sort of linking it in to surrounding neighbourhoods. And there's an increasing discussion around this idea of third places in the UK. And third places are places like pubs and cafes and public spaces that we visit regularly that aren't home or work. So if you think of home and work as like your first and second spaces, then third spaces are these places that aren't those two that we visit regularly, that we go to and we meet people and we hang out and we, just do stuff. Kids might use them just to play around or skateboard. Adults might use them just to have a coffee and a drink and a chat. And it's an important discussion because a lot of these places are disappearing. You're getting a lot of pubs that are closing, you get a load of cafes that are closing, and increasingly I think we're starting to see public spaces are starting to feel more and more monetized. There are places that you don't really feel like you belong in unless you've bought something like a coffee or whatever. But these types of places are the glue that holds our societies and our cultures together. Humans need them because we're intrinsically social animals. Seeing them disappear is a really bad sign for our society. And there's been loads of evidence into the benefits of having third spaces. So you might think that this isn't something to necessarily worry about, but people that have lots of third spaces to hang out in their neighborhood, or people that visit third spaces regularly, they report less depression, they report sleeping better, they claim that their lives lives are easier, they have more friends, they think that their neighbours are more trustworthy. So people are happier and healthier when they have these sorts of places on their doorstep to just freely hang out in. And you also see things like a drop in burglary and theft in neighbourhoods that have third places versus those that don't. And so this square that they're building here, which will be for everyone to use, and will have loads of streets and pathways leading into it from the surrounding neighbourhood, as well as the 5,000 square foot community hall that they're building for locals, will hopefully introduce a bit more of a third space into this area. Now obviously, like, inner London has loads of pubs and cafes and things like that as well, but it's important that we still recognise the value of these types of places and ultimately aim to create as many as possible. That's just how you meet people, that's how you meet your neighbours, that's why people that have these types of places on their doorstep end up trusting their neighbours more. And obviously, again, this is like a sunny day glorified render, but it does look really nice. And I mean, if they put all of those trees in and all of that planting and vegetation, we've already seen this at a lot of different development projects in London now. We've seen it at Elephant Park, we've seen it at King's Cross, where it's a very, very similar square with fountains and trees and planting and that. And people really do just use these spaces regularly. It helps that they're designed in such a way that is integrated into the surrounding urban fabric, so people just end up walking through them as they go about their day. And that means that the squares feel busy, makes them feel safer, makes them feel like places that they actually want to go and spend some time in, which is vital to the success of these types of places. It's vital to these places becoming third spaces for the surrounding neighbourhood. And yeah, especially with the Mercato's food hall spilling into the street there and all of the other different restaurants and cafes and things like that spilling out, it is going to feel like quite a welcoming place. I know some of you might be thinking, oh, but you just said that we should be creating more places that people don't feel like they have to pay to be in. But if you do go to King's Cross, if you do go to Elephant Park, there are restaurants and cafes surrounding it. They make the area feel busy, they bring people in, but I've done it loads of times in these types of places. You just go and sit on the lawn and you can spend all day there without actually spending any money in these places. There's no one policing whether or not you're spending money. It's not like, I don't know, going into like a Starbucks and just sitting there without paying for a drink. But with these types of places, yeah, you could just go and sit on that bench and watch the fountains. You could just go and sit on the lawn and have a picnic or whatever. Very often no one's going to come up to you and kick you out. And the fact that it's not a massive plaza with no vegetation or trees or anything like that, the fact that they have filled it with a bit of woodland and a bit of vegetation and some gardens and some different little pockets here and there, is also going to make it feel like quite an exciting and vibrant place to be. It's not just this like windswept square with nothing going on, because that's not the type of place that we want to hang out in. It is a place that has loads of trees and greenery, which is also good for mental health. It's also, I have a stat actually. What is I have a good little blurb, because I find that I talk about greenery and trees a lot in these videos. I've been reading the book Happy City by Charles Montgomery, and there's a really good quote in here that I'll read to you now. There's a stark psychological difference between tenants, so like residents in buildings with green views, and those who could only see concrete. People with the bare views told us that they were psychologically fatigued and were more likely to be rude, to fly off the handle, more likely to slap someone in anger. They just had a harder time coping. They even yelled at their children more. And it says that when the researchers began examining police records, they found a mountain of hard data that linked lack of greenness of courtyards to local crime rates. So buildings that looked out on trees and grass experienced about half the violent crime level of buildings that looked out on barren courtyards. The less green the environment, the higher the rate of assault. Battery? What does battery mean? Is any Americans in the audience? I don't know what battery means. Robbery and murder. This is especially remarkable given the fact that criminologists have pointed out that bushes and trees provide convenient cover for illicit activity. So even though you could very well hide behind a tree or a bush and do some illicit activity, it's actually these types of places that make us feel like we don't want to do illicit activity. I don't know how that works, but apparently it does. Nature deprivation was not merely unhealthy, it was dangerous, partly because it left people feeling more raw and aggressive, and partly because most residents simply abandoned barren spaces, removing the watchful eyes that keep them safe. So yeah, more trees, more greenery, and I quite like that. I saved that because I was like, I talk about greenery so much in these videos to the point that I actually hear myself say the word greenery and I'm like, oh god, here we go again. So that's just a bit of empirical reason as to why these types of places are good when they're filled with bushes and trees and vegetation and greenery. So Mercato's is probably one of the most popular food markets in London. When I tell people that I'm from this area, because I live about a mile away from this area, it's one of the main things they bring up. And in my opinion, it's better than like Box Park and all that. Box Park to me can sometimes feel a little bit sterile. Whereas, yeah, Mercato's always feels quite vibrant, always feels quite characterful compared to those kind of other food markets. But it was always intended to be a meanwhile use. It's located in an old paper mill, and this site has been earmarked for development for like 20 years now. So I think the landowners, to just sort of get a bit of income or get a bit of use onto the site, generate a bit of activity for the site. In 2016, they decided to set up this food hall. It's been really, really successful, but apparently, due to their current arrangements, Mercato's will not be able to operate past 2030 due to new requirements on EPC ratings. EPC ratings are sort of like the environmental efficiency ratings for buildings, and the government are bringing in new sort of benchmarks, new rules in 2030. And there's going to be a load of buildings and a load of premises that basically don't meet those standards anymore, and apparently Mercato's is one of them. And therefore the intention is to provide a permanent, modern and sustainable space for them to return to once the development is complete. And apparently Mercato's will remain on site while the development gets built. So there's one of the buildings on site that they're not planning on developing. Mercato's will move into there, so they'll stay on site, and they'll also get first refusal on that new food hall that they're building as part of the redevelopment. And this map here shows the site as it is at the moment. So you can see that Mercato's takes up the majority of it, and there are also these other heritage buildings, the ones coloured brown. And these heritage buildings will mostly be retained, enhanced and built into the new development. And I love it when developments do this. I love it when they don't just clear the whole site. They pick out the buildings that are worth keeping, get rid of the rest, but redevelop it in such a way that integrates those older buildings, integrates those heritage assets into the new development. It makes the new development look a lot more characterful than if you just, cleared the site, got rid of everything, let's build a big new modern concrete, glass, whatever, as if there was nothing there before. And then you get all of these different architectural styles and all of these different sizes and layers all jostling together. It creates a street environment that is incredibly exciting to be in and gives your eye a lot to be entertained by. There's also these street trees that they've mapped all around the site there, and they are going to be kept, as well as the 98 new trees that they're going to be planting as part of the development. And again, not getting rid of those trees, keeping all of those mature trees. If you keep the trees, if you keep the mature trees, it helps the new developments become integrated into the urban fabric much, much better. Makes it look like something that's been there forever, makes it look like something that belongs there. It grounds these new developments a lot better into their urban fabric. It's building on what's already there, keeping the best of what is already there, and bringing the next evolution of the urban fabric here, which is the way that cities have always developed organically over thousands and thousands of years. And yeah, you can see here from this 3D plan of the site, those heritage buildings have been kept. So you've got that brown building there, and then the sort of the more grey one, and then this sort of this white looking building here. And therefore the street edge remains very, very textured. It remains very, very characterful and varied architecturally. So let's talk more about some of those heritage buildings. So we've got two main buildings that I want to talk about, 82 Borough Road and 83 Borough Road. We'll start with 83 Borough Road. So this was originally built, I think, as a music hall, but it's now more of a sort of a community centre. So again, good that we're keeping these kind of community assets for people to use. Now, I quite like this building, but I was digging into the architect's statement, and apparently they tried to get it listed a few years ago, but it was rejected by English Heritage. English Heritage stated that the design is by an obscure architect and is somewhat clumsy, which I think is quite mean. I don't think it's that clumsy. It has these crazy turrets which make it look like a castle, which is a little bit weird for this sort of part of London. It obviously wasn't built in the Norman era or anything like that, but it does look like a sort of a castle, which maybe is why they're calling it clumsy. But whatever. So they're gonna keep that. They're gonna chop off sort of an extension that was built later than the actual building itself to build a new pedestrian thoroughfare into the square itself, and then they're also gonna redo those turrets, reappoint some of the architectural details and the facade, and make it look brand new again. And here's how they've integrated that building with the skyscraper that they're building behind it. So obviously you've got this low-level human scale frontage of 83 Borough Road, of that music hall in front, and then behind it they've got this huge facade of a skyscraper. Now, in some places I've seen this done terribly. So there's a really good example in Cardiff, or not a really good example at all, a really bad example of where this has been done in Cardiff, where it looks dreadful. But this, I think, is quite sympathetic. The new skyscraper at the back, yeah, it's huge in comparison. It is quite monolithic, but I think they've done it in such a way that integrates those two elements quite nicely, whereas the building in Cardiff just does not do that. Moving next door to 82 Borough Road, this is a former Baptist chapel, and they're going to convert this building to, like shops and restaurants, I think. So there's going to be active frontage along the ground floor there. It's a lovely building, as I'm sure you'll agree. They're going to be repainting, so again, make it look good as new. And so not only will this building front onto the Borough Road elevation, it also backs up onto the new public square that they're creating at the centre of the development. And so we have this render here, which shows how that gorgeous facade will front onto the new square that they're creating at the centre of the development. Using these heritage assets and bringing them into the development, integrating them into the new development, makes the whole redevelopment feel more grounded, gives the square a lot more character. Having this older building fronting onto the square is not just a reference to the area's history, but it also just adds a little bit of character, a little bit of architectural interest. If you walk down any random street in London, you'll see architecture from loads of different eras throughout history, and I think that's something to be celebrated, and so that's what they're doing here. So you're going to have loads of different frontages, loads of different architectural facades going on in this square, which will just definitely make it a more interesting place to be. So the development looks good. I think it's one of the most beautiful schemes proposed for London this decade. As I mentioned, it's introducing a new public space, it's introducing a new community hall that will hopefully contribute another third place into this neighbourhood. It's reusing heritage features, it's human scale, it's got loads of greenery. Why then has it been so controversial? Why has it attracted 400 objections from locals? And there are lots of different reasons given, and I've pulled out the main two. So the first one is affordable housing. The proposal has made headlines over its like affordable housing provision. When the 2024 proposal for this scheme came out, 17% of the 892 homes proposed were earmarked for affordable housing. And a few days ago from when I'm recording this, there was a new application that was submitted that brought that affordable housing contribution down to 10%. So the developers say that the change to affordable housing provision is required to improve the viability of the development, to enable it to actually get built. So that'll be 832 private market homes, 42 social rent homes, which will be rated at the local authority housing rate, which I'll put here now, and 18 intermediate homes, which are usually priced at like a 20% discount to market rent. So if the rent is £1,000 a month, affordable housing at the intermediate tenure will be £800 a month. And that tenure has come under a lot of criticism in London because of course rents here are so expensive that even a 20% discount is still unaffordable to many. But the social rent homes at the local authority housing rate, they are a lot more affordable. I think they're subsidised by the local council. So those 42 social rent homes will definitely be affordable. And I'll put on screen the proposed unit mix so you can see the split between private, social rent and intermediate. So you can see most of those social rent homes are going to be 2-bed flats with 6 3-bed flats and 6 4-bed flats. And then the intermediate tenure, they're going to be all 2-bed flats. Now, I believe that we should be building hundreds of thousands more social rent homes in the UK, especially in cities like London that are like chronically expensive, and it's well documented how expensive London is. We need people on all income levels to be able to afford not just to live in London, but to also live in a well-connected, accessible locations. Not just keep the city from losing its soul from people like artists and creatives who don't necessarily get paid a lot of money, but who contribute a lot to this city's culture, but also from people like teachers and nurses and cleaners and things like that that just keep this city going. If you keep pricing teachers out of London, what's going to happen? There's not going to be any teachers in the city. If you keep pricing nurses out of London, you're going to get hospitals losing their staff, or worse, having to commute long distances to get to work, which is terrible for people's mental health, terrible for people's lifestyles, and terrible for people's families if they have to commute too far to work. They're not going to be able to see their families quite as often. That's terrible for your mental health, terrible for society as a whole. And while it might be expensive to provide social rent homes for people, the effects of not providing social rent homes are even more expensive. If hospitals lose out on nurses, that's a massive societal cost. If schools lose out on teachers, that's another massive societal cost. If public workers can't afford to live near the jobs that they do, then the whole fabric of the city starts to collapse. At the moment, we're only building about 2,200 social rent homes a year in this country, which is shockingly bad for a country that has nearly 70 million people. And as I explored in my previous video, councils and governments are building much fewer homes than they were 50 to 70 years ago, right after the war. And I think we need the kind of Harold Wilson style government housing boom that we saw after the war to build hundreds of thousands of new social rent homes across the UK to properly address this housing emergency. And it is an emergency. I sometimes get comments saying that I'm a developer shill for the sort of optimistic way that I talk about these developments. And I get why that is. Like, I get it when I'm sort of like, oh yeah, look, a new Art Deco skyscraper is being built. Oh look, they've put a tree up. Isn't that fantastic? Like, I get why people think I'm a developer shill. But I'm not a developer shill. I've never been paid for any of these videos. I've never been encouraged by any developers or any architects or anything like that to make any of these videos. I pick these developments because I like the look of them and I want to talk about them. I just want to see more homes get built and see our cities realise their full potential. But until we reform the system and get that kind of Harold Wilson style government housing boom that I really want to see, we're relying on developers to build social housing instead. Governments and councils basically stopped building social housing in about the 1980s, and since then we've been relying on private developers to build all homes in the UK, not just private market homes of course, but also social and affordable and all of these different tenures as well. And obviously private developers are motivated by profit, just like all businesses. If they can't make a profit, then they won't do anything, they won't build anything. So that means that they have to develop private homes in combination with affordable and social tenures in order for the private homes to sort of cross-subsidise the social housing. So that means that we get sites like this where private developers will build a load of private market homes as well as a load of social and affordable homes, and they use profits from the private market homes to sort of cross-subsidise and pay for providing the social and affordable tenure homes. And that market, that environment that we've built for ourselves over the last 50 years really only leaves us with two choices. Number one is that we get more social housing, we build more social housing, however small the amount, in combination with private market homes. Or number two, we get no new homes at all, including no new social housing. So yes, we do need more social housing, we need more affordable housing on sites like this in central locations. But given a choice between some new social housing and no new social housing, I'm going to take the option that means we get some new social housing. This is just my opinion though, I'm not saying that I'm right or anything like that. You guys might have a different perspective in the comments, and please do post them below, because over the last 2 years of having this channel, I've learned so much from just reading comments from you guys. I'm literally always learning, always open to changing my opinion on stuff like this. I'm not saying it's the correct way to think, I'm not saying I'm right at all, I might be completely wrong, I don't know. I'm really open to having my opinion changed on stuff like this. It's obviously a very, very complex issue, and I don't have all of the answers, and I think it would be quite naive of me to sort of assume that I did. And another of the two main reasons why this was such a controversial development was shadowing. So being such tall buildings, 38 and 44 stories in total, obviously they're going to cast a shadow over the surrounding area. And this gets into a whole other debate about where it's appropriate to build tall buildings, because obviously this is zone 1, you're near 2 tube stations, there's loads of bus routes going past it. In theory, it is the best place really to develop at density to really make the most of these very, very central sites, so that most people are living in sustainable and well-connected locations. They're not going to need a car, they're not going to be putting pressure on the local transport network, they're going to be walking everywhere, they're going to be cycling everywhere, they're going to be getting public transport everywhere, which is intrinsically better for society and the economy and public health than it is to have them living in kind of a far-flung suburb where they've got to drive everywhere and not have much time to spend with their family and friends because they're stuck in traffic or just travelling long distances. I met a lady at the consultation event for this scheme way back in 2024, and I think she was saying that she lived in there's a sort of a low-rise housing estate just across Borough Road from where this development is planned. And she was saying that she was opposed to the plan because it would cast a shadow over not just her house, but her whole kind of estate, her whole sort of neighbourhood that she lives in. And yeah, you can see that because these blocks are to the south of that neighbourhood, because the sun is in the south, they will definitely block out sunlight for that estate at least some parts of the day. So in response to that, I don't know if it goes far enough necessarily because they're still massive tall buildings, but in response to that consultation, the developers submitted an updated app in 2024 which reduced the height of the block that's closest to that estate and stacked all of the height instead at the Elephant and Castle end. So the Elephant and Castle end already has a lot of tall buildings. In the previous plan, which I'll show you now, the taller block was going to be on Borough Road itself, and then they've moved the taller building to the Elephant and Castle side. So hopefully that's going to cast less of a shadow. It probably still will cast a shadow just because it's a tall building, but I think that, as I said, gets into a whole other debate that will probably be, it's probably worth its own video. So now let's have a look at some more renders of this absolutely stunning scheme. So here we are on Borough Road itself. We're looking down towards Elephant and Castle. You've got that Flatiron style building there. Just off screen there, I know for a fact that there's a really nice pub with green tiles just on the right there. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called the Ship or something like that. Those green tiles, I've literally just noticed this, have been echoed on the ground floor frontage of this red brick Flatiron building there. That's really, really nice. A nice bit of sort of architectural referencing going on there. And the buildings on this site have been oriented in such a way that there are going to be no single aspect north facing apartments at all. Single aspect flats are flats that have like one window facing in one direction, and dual aspect are flats that have at least two different outlooks. So obviously dual aspect flats are more desirable because they're going to have sunlight for more of the day, whereas single aspect flats, because you've only got that one view, you're not going to get much daylight. And of course, north facing single aspect is very undesirable because not only do you not have multiple outlooks, you also just do not see the sun all day. So yeah, there's going to be no single aspect north facing apartments, which is obviously going to be a lot better for the people living in these homes. They're going to get a lot more daylight and just brightness into their homes. And all of the apartments will also average 8% larger than the minimum space standards. So obviously in the UK, we have a sort of a minimum sizes that apartments and houses can be. And apparently the homes that they're designing in this development are going to be 8% larger on average than those minimums. And they've also managed to design most of the plant and servicing and like cycle storage and things like that into the basement of the development. So where these buildings hit the street, it'll mostly be retail units and restaurants and bars and entrances and things that bring life and light onto the surrounding streetscape. So it'll really activate those frontages, it'll really activate the streets and make them feel busier and more lively as a result. Now, I mentioned earlier that the architecture of this development very much pulls from Art Deco. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of this emerging trend that we're seeing in new architecture in the UK that does seem to borrow a lot of elements from the Art Deco style of about 100 years ago. In this render, which shows the sort of the central square again in the middle, I want to pull your attention to that vertical Art Deco expression that you can see along the roof line there. And I'll pull up an example of some original Art Deco from New York and Chicago, which also has these very, very similar elements. And it just gives these buildings more of a vertical emphasis. And this strong vertical expression sort of ties all of the levels together and it creates unity in the building. It means that the building celebrates its height rather than just being like a stack of floors. The massing is sort of split up with these different setbacks all the way up along the facade, which help to break up the massing a little bit and increase the sort of the slenderness of these towers. And these setbacks enable the tower to narrow towards the top of the building, creating more of a crown. And you see these sort of setbacks, you see this sort of shape in a lot of Art Deco skyscrapers. The Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building are among them. And then this vertical expression of the facade continues all the way to the top, giving them a highly defined crown as they meet the sky. And this view shows how the skyscrapers will look from a little bit further away. This is one of the residential streets in the area. It provides a bit of a terminating vista to this street here. And obviously with the crown shape of these buildings, with the sort of the slenderness and those setbacks, it really does create a really good looking terminating vista for this residential street. There is another very, very similar building that sort of pulls from the Art Deco style. If you go towards St George's Circus, I think it was built about 10 years ago. Come to think of it, I think it might actually be the same architect as this scheme. It's certainly a very, very similar style that they've adopted. I'll put on screen if it is the same architect. But that is also a really good looking development. I think if you want an indication as to how these buildings might turn out, go and visit that. It's at St George's Circus. It is a gorgeous building. I think it's sort of an octagonal shape, and that also has a really good looking crown, and it also has this really beautiful vertical expression and lovely ground floor interaction on that development as well. This lovely sort of brick, stone, very natural materials. That sort of human scale at the ground floor is going to make it seem a lot more embedded, and it makes it feel a lot more welcoming to be at ground level around some of these buildings. And I also wanted to talk about cladding. Here are some of the cladding elevations that the architects have provided. It's not just a load of concrete, it's not just a load of metal. It is, yeah, brick, stone, types of materials that you see on buildings all over London. Even individual buildings are split up with loads of different colours. So if you look at this one on the right here, there's like multicoloured brick. You've got that red glazing on the spandrels in between the windows, and then this lovely sort of almost like a metal pattern along the bottom of the windows there. It's all very nicely broken up. It's not just a big monocolour. It might look like one colour from further away, but as you get closer, you start to see that detail pop a little bit more, and that just adds a lot more visual interest as you're walking by, as you're sort of interacting with the buildings closer. I love that triangular pattern that they've put on the spandrels in between the windows there as well. That I think is to reference, like, because the site is called Borough Triangle, I think they've put triangles there. I might be wrong, but that seems like a very architect thing to do. Now, there are a number of businesses that are already located on site, and there is therefore a business relocation scheme for these businesses. There are 33 separate businesses on site, so they've allocated £250,000 to help them relocate to places that are nearby. Obviously, Mercatos will be staying on site. It'll be a much smaller location, but it'll stay on site while the redevelopment happens. As I mentioned, they'll get first refusal on the new food hall that they're building as part of the redevelopment, and this business relocation scheme will help the various businesses that are already located on the site. And the developers are saying that the development will create 596 jobs once it's finished, and it will create 324 jobs in like construction and different trades per year while it's being built. The scheme was approved in March 2025. There was an updated app, as I mentioned, that went in literally this month, so April 2026. That'll have to get planning approval, but I think I went past it on the bus the other day, and I've seen that they have started to clear the site. They've started to do some demolition, so who knows, it could be under construction this year. I know that sort of construction in London is really difficult at the moment. There's a lot of constraints. Construction costs have gone up through the roof. So a lot of this stuff is having difficulty getting off the ground at the moment. And there's not really, I've not seen a timeline that's been provided. So I can't tell you sort of, when it'll start construction or anything like that. Obviously they'll have to get planning approval on this latest application that they've submitted in April 2026. That could take a few months, but hopefully construction work will start soon. So I think that's everything. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like the development? Do you like the sort of the style, the architectural style? What do you think about the kind of affordable housing reduction that the developers are proposing? Do you live nearby? Is your house going to get cast in shadow? I want to hear all your thoughts in the comments below. And as I said, I've learned so much just from reading the comments under my videos over the last few years that I've had this channel. I'm always open to sort of changing my mind on stuff. I personally think that this is one of the best looking new developments that have been proposed in London in recent years, and I can't wait to see it get built. I can't wait to see it come to fruition. If it looks anything like the renders, which I know I always say on this channel, these artists' impressions that architects create are always like a sunny day and everything looks perfect, and it's always sunny in Renderland. So if it ends up looking like that, it'll be amazing, and I think it'll look fantastic, and I do think it will be a benefit to the surrounding area. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe. I also have a Patreon and a Buy Me a Coffee, which I'll put a link to here if you want to support me there so I can carry on making more videos like this. There are so many different developments like this all over the UK that I'd love to cover. It's mainly just like a time thing. It takes ages to put these videos together, and I have a full-time job as well, so I do want to get around all of them. But if there are any new developments that you want me to check out, please put those in the comments below and I'll add them to my list. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.